chasing with me. You know, if something doesn't happen in the first 5 minutes, it's a bust of a day. Children, that's not always the way it works. Late Kick Live here, high atop, kind of, Gainesville, Florida. We are at the University of Florida, Tuesday, April 16th, the year of our Lord, 2024. Yes, you may not be able to tell by looking around me, but the transfer portal is open. Some things have happened already. Not necessarily a volcanic eruption, not necessarily college football's World War III or anything of that nature. And so what was this built up to be? Nothing? I'm not quite sure that's how I'd read that just yet. So you and I will talk about that tonight, as we often do. I got some spring intel to deliver you. We got Billy Napier, Florida head coach, one-on-one on the show tonight. And we sat down with him earlier today. And as I promised you, I don't care if you're a Colorado State fan or if you're a Florida fan, there are some really, really interesting and insightful things that he brought to the table, because he doesn't shy away from it. I asked him about a lot of stuff you guys talk about, and he looked me in the eye and answered it, and kind of looked you in the eye and answered it. So we'll have that on the show tonight. Jam-packed. They're watching us in Ocala, Florida. They're watching in Syracuse, New York, Colorado Springs, Colorado. 2 shout-outs already for Colorado Springs on the show tonight. And Talladega, Alabama. We've been in Gainesville all day. When I tell you that this has been a first-class visit, I mean, literally, it's been a first-class visit. We were on a visit today. I think we've seen more of this place in 12 hours than I could have seen in 10 lifetimes of coming here just as a fan or maybe even a member of the media. So, man, the entire staff here, like tons and tons and tons of respect and thanks to them. But also, there's a lot behind the scenes. Go over to Instagram at Late Kick Josh that maybe I can't show you on the show tonight. I mean, we've got a weight room in our background. We're in the indoor right now. And if you're listening on podcast, this means nothing to you. But you can go check it out on the Instagram page, because there's a lot there, as we often do on the road, where we can show you things that we don't have time to show you on the show. So I don't want to waste your time, because I know what all of you are thinking. I know what all of you have been talking about as I flick my card off camera. The transfer portal opened today. There are some, myself included, who thought that and think that this is going to be a really big deal. In fact, I've been on record, as some of you have pointed out today, over the past few weeks, is talking about how this period could be more active than any single transfer portal window period that we've seen to date in the sport. Now, this is still a pretty young concept. So half of the sport didn't fall off a cliff today. So what happened? Were you clickbaiting us? Were you just overhyping? Well, no, that didn't break out today. I will readily admit to you, I thought by sundown of the first day we would have several bigger names in the portal than we already have. Now, I will also honestly tell you I'm glad that we don't, but that's not what you're here for. You're not here for me to tell you I'm happy I'm wrong. You're here for me to tell you I was wrong. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to do that yet. So, a couple of things that are happening right now. Number one, I'm very cautious about this because we're less than 24 hours into the spring window being open. Number two, I am keenly aware of how much back channeling and how much feeling out there has been today. That's nothing official. That doesn't mean a kid goes in the portal. And honestly, we could have 50 guys reach out to Pate State about feelers and about what you could offer. If the kid doesn't go in the portal, the kid doesn't go in the portal. So that's happening. I think that collectives have done an excellent job of getting out ahead of this. And to be honest, that's not just a this cycle thing. That's a last few cycles thing. So I still think there's a lot of movement coming here. I mean, we had Tennessee's top tackler go in the portal. Colorado's had a ton of movement. I think the kid from Pitt, Dayan Hayes, who I'll talk about in a second, I think that's a pretty big story, although he's not a superstar nationally known name. There's been some movement today. There wasn't that headline grabber. Caden Proctor's already back at Alabama after like 15 minutes at Iowa. So it's not like we had tumbleweeds blowing down the portal streets. Like, some stuff has happened. I also want to remind you, we've got several big name programs that have spring games, not last Saturday, but this coming Saturday. There's going to be movement, guys. Now, I will tell you, as I've said, I think a few times, I have thought and still continue to think that there's some pretty big movement coming. I don't want there to be big movement. So if there's a thing that happens in this calendar year of college football where I have to sit here and tell you, man, I whiffed on that one, I kind of hope it's this. I won't hesitate to tell you if it happens. I don't care. I do know that some people in our industry took it upon themselves to accuse us of doing some things and trafficking in some practices that we don't traffic in here. You know, attention grabbing, clickbaiting. Yeah, no, that's not really us. I think our track record speaks for itself on that. But I did notice. Those people won't be mentioned tonight, but I did notice. But hey, if we're wrong on this, we're wrong on this. And if this particular thing I'm wrong on, I happen to be happy about it. I'm not sure we're wrong just yet on it. So keep a bookmark on that. Number 2. As Mima always said, don't count your roster before the portal closes. We got a lot of teams with spring games coming up this weekend. I think there's a lot of back channeling going on right now. I think that there's leverage that's in play here. You know, the strategy person to person and player to player that a lot of guys have is really interesting. And you always get feedback on that after the case. That G5 churn, though, which is inevitable. You know, when you have the state of college football as it is right now, you're going to have G5 rosters get rated case to case. That's kind of happening right now. I do at least notice that there's another side to this. It's a much uglier side. And it's the side where if you're entering a more professionalized era of college football, that also means some dudes are getting cut. Just call it like it is. There's some guys being told in no uncertain terms, there's not a spot here for you anymore. You should probably explore the portal. You can call it whatever you want to. Those are called cuts, at least where I come from. Those are called cuts. Well, here's the thing. You may be a 2 or a 3 in the SEC. That may mean you go start at certainly an FCS program, but many G5s and some lower-level P5s as well. What I'm saying is you're going to have some big-time talent walk out the door of the G5 ranks and elevate to whatever you want to call the P4 these days. You're also going to have a pretty plentiful supply going the other direction. You don't have to love that. I certainly don't. But that's kind of an is what it is proposition right now. And I guess what I would say about that is it could be a lot worse. You could be losing your guys, and there's no recourse. There is no other action that you can take. You're just stuck with it. So we had Proctor move back to Bama. That was expected. Elijah Herring was Tennessee's leading tackler, and yet he goes into the portal. And in Knoxville, I don't think it was a huge shock. They don't want to lose his brother, but I don't think it was a huge shock that they lost him. Cormani McLean went in at Colorado today. That seemed like oil and water from the outset. I mean, Dion called that kid out before they even played game 1, week 1 last year about his practice habit. So that wasn't very surprising. But here's where my mind is at on this. Day 1 was not as active as I thought it would be. Fingers crossed, that just means this period is going to be inactive. I could do without that kind of traffic, contrary to popular belief. Point 2, I'm not quite sure we're out of the woods on that. I think that there probably are still some fairly sizable dominoes to fall. And I'm just telling you, anytime I've shared opinion about this on this show, it's not because I conjured it up out of thin air. I'm articulating what a lot of folks inside of various football programs and athletic departments have told me. So maybe it was their worst fears that they told me, and maybe those worst fears aren't going to be realized. And if so, it's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But we have... You know, the conditions are still favorable. I mentioned storm chasing at the outset because it's my favorite hobby outside of college football. Look, we identify areas where the parameters are in place, and we go set up, and we hope for the best. We don't hope for property damage, loss of life. Hopefully you have stuff happen out in the middle of an unpopulated field, but you can't guarantee anything. You just know which parameters mean business. The parameters are in place in college football for the next 2 and some odd weeks. Doesn't mean fireworks are going to go off. Just means if they do, this would be the time that they do. Now, as for things that we can more tangibly look at, spring practice is going on all over the country right now. There are a couple of things that I really want to draw your attention to tonight. We're going to have Billy Napier on the show in just a few minutes, and that's going to be really, really interesting for a lot of you. Really interesting. A lot of you wanted questions asked, and they got asked tonight, so stick around. Anyway, spring practice all over the place. The very latest that we're getting, and I'm going to start with Michigan because we hadn't talked about him a whole lot. You know, or I think you know, Alex Orji is the guy they're looking to as hopefully the guy who takes over for J.J. McCarthy. He's off to the league. And Alex Orji is a phenomenally gifted athlete, and they don't question that. Therefore, they've sort of structured spring up there to find out what he can do throwing the football. And it hadn't been a lot of quarterback scramble, let's move the pocket. It's stand here and deliver this thing in the window or in the area of the field. And let's see if you can go through progressions. Let's see if you can work to number 2 and number 3 on this route concept. That's the stuff that's happening in Michigan in spring football right now. So kind of going back and forth with Sam Webb from the Michigan Insider on this, it sounds like they're pleased with and maybe even surprised at some of the progress that he's made on that front. Now, that's what spring sounds like at a lot of places. So cautious optimism, normally the name of the game around here in spring. But outside of that, I mean, you look at like Mason Graham and Grant and Stewart and Moore, the guys on that defensive line have made things very challenging for that offensive line. And sometimes you can be good enough on that side of the ball where it's hard to get an accurate read on how good your offense is and how good your quarterback's developing. But the other thing to pay attention to at Michigan, and the thing that all the Michigan folks have been talking about is, did we have such a rock-solid structure in place with Jim Harbaugh that we developed a callus to what it takes to compete on the NIL front? And I think there was a lot of truth to that. It's an ultimate, like, generational testament to the culture up there that they got that crew to stick around. I mean, it's probably the last, I don't want to say this because I hope it's not true, it's probably the last great classical college football roster that you'll see. I know a lot of you think that they cut corners to get where they got last year. I'm not even talking about that to get ahead of what the comment section is going to look like. I'm talking about guys who are recruited and they come in together and they lose and they take their lumps and they develop, and then 4 or 5 years later they're still arm in arm, same class, same dudes they've bled and sweated next to for 4 years. That's college football. It's what it used to always be about. Less and less so today, but Michigan had that. And they didn't pay the dudes a ton of money to do it. And they had offers, those guys did, to leave, and they didn't. They stuck around. I don't know how often that's going to happen in the future. I think at Michigan, they've been pretty quick to realize now, we got to get this in gear. We got to get this NIL structure in gear. And that's the other thing that I think they've made strides in. Probably not where they need to be yet, but they've made strides there. So just that's a side note in spring up there. Florida State. All right, now we're really going to have to practice our cautious optimism. So Jordan Travis was great last year. Florida State was great last year. And Jordan Travis and a lot of those guys that were responsible for that move on. So DJ Uyunglele, who himself is writing one of the most interesting chapters and books in recent college football memory, Clemson, Oregon State, now Florida State. I want to be careful on this, but Brennan Sonnone over at Knowles 24/7 has talked a lot about this, and I'm going to echo it. I think that the last 4 or 5 practices down there and the last scrimmage have given that coaching staff and some of the folks inside those 4 walls there a ton of confidence that that guy can play at a really high level for them this year. They hoped he could. That's why they brought him in. But accuracy and execution have always been the two things that sort of limited DJ. Just inconsistent. You'll see flashes and you go, wow, if you could bottle that up, this dude would be a top 5 draft pick. He's never bottled it up. It's not a guarantee he will this year. He looked phenomenal. Kind of turning a corner, light bulb coming on sort of stuff last few days in practice, last scrimmage. So, again, we could be sitting here halfway through the 2024 season, and they've already lost a couple of games, and it was just a mirage. I can only tell you what people inside the program are telling us. That's all I can do, and you take that and you do with it what you want to. He is in the right place to get developed. At that position, I'll just tell you that. He's in the right place to get developed. Also, I want to look at Notre Dame right quick. So this is really interesting. So Tim O'Malley and a lot of the guys do a great job at Irish Illustrated. Listen to this sentence, though. So from Tim through us to your ears, you remember Jimmy Clausen, you remember Brady Quinn, like those two guys, mid to late 2000s, I guess, which is a ways back now. I hope Quinn's not watching, man, but Brady, it's been a while. Those guys were really good pure passers. They haven't necessarily had guys they would call elite pure passers since then. Now, they brought Riley Leonard in from the portal, but he's out right now with injury. He'll be the starting quarterback there this fall. He's out with injury, which leads me to the point Tim O'Malley has been making to us, and that is C.J. Carr is a guy who's in there. He's probably going to be their backup this year. Listen to this. This is worth a paper pop. Listen to this. The best pure passer since Jimmy Clausen to come through this program. I don't care what Clausen did or didn't do at the next level. He is talking about the physical tools and attributes that certain guys have had and haven't had at Notre Dame. And if that's accurate, and then you combine that with the fact that the Carr's not even expected to start this year, does Notre Dame sneakily have one of the higher-rated quarterback rooms in the country because we haven't really inserted them into that conversation. Normally when you have to go get a guy out of the portal, it's not synonymous with we've got really good depth in our quarterback room. Maybe they do. Jaden Greathouse also at the wide receiver 1 position for them. Really good, really versatile. That's a name to keep an eye on. And I will not do a month's worth of practice intel without slipping some Iowa State in there on you. You know my affection for Rocco Becht. Not able to pronounce his last name. I am able to respect his game. I've explained to you many times that dude came on more and more as last year went on. Several offers to leave there. He stayed there. That team is one of the top 5 most experienced returning rosters in college football this year, and I feel very good about Iowa State not being at the top of the odds boards by any stretch, but being a team that's in contention in there in November to do things that probably outside of me, no one's going to predict them to do. And sometimes I blindly do that. This year there may be some legitimacy to my Iowa State prediction. Also, Alex Bussey at Cyclone Alert has done a really good job of filling us in on the goings-on in Ames. So right now, surprisingly, Rick, what would you say? Like one of the lower dew point days that we'll have around here until Christmas, basically. So we've been around campus all day, and I didn't even hardly break a sweat. That won't last much longer, which just means you go in Academy Sports and Outdoors and you look at those fold-out chairs, but more importantly for the folks in and around Gainesville, you look at those canopies, and this place will be littered with them a few months from now. We got 19 Saturdays, I think it is, until college football kicks off, and it will just be a sea, hopefully, of Academy-branded tents and canopies, and you can get the grills you need there. The full tailgate scene is available at Academy, and they've been with us, man. You guys know this. There was a brief hiatus, but couple of weeks went by, too many people asked where they were, so Academy's back like they never left because they didn't. And I've explained that situation to you guys. Academy Sports and Outdoors, your one-stop shop for all things outdoor sporting goods plus. And if you don't have one in your backyard, hopefully we'll rectify that. But in the meantime, like if you live in rural Idaho, you don't have one in your backyard, as long as you got internet, and because you're accessing the show, I'm pretty sure you do, academy.com is your hookup. Before we toss to our conversation with Billy Napier, I don't normally do this. I don't normally double dip on content, but I know we got a lot of Florida folks watching tonight. First thing I would tell you is I would recommend, I would ask that you guys subscribe to the channel because I know the complaint that a lot of you have. If you're like me 5 or 10 years ago, you probably look around and you say, there's a way that I would like college football to be talked about. There's a way that I would love for it to have a communal feel. I just don't really see that. Well, you may not see it where you've been looking, but it's here. This is it. We don't cover any other sport. We just do this all year round. We don't even believe in the word off-season. We whisper it. We don't even say it out loud. It's like the F-bomb on our show. And so subscribe to it. It's free. And the only way you keep it free, the only thing you have to do to keep it free is just subscribe to the channel. That's it. And drop some gator emojis in the live chat. That never hurts either. But here's what I wanted to do, because I know what I'm about to say is going to live for better or for worse this fall. I know there's a lot of outside noise and opinion about University of Florida right now, about Billy Napier right now. And it's because they haven't won a ton of football games in the first 2 years he's been there. Now, you know, as well as I do, what a bottom line business this ultimately is at the end of the day. You also know, unless you're very new to our program, that I am someone who detests the phrase, you are what your record says you are, in college athletics, specifically college football, because it hardly ever tells the whole story. There are some 7-win teams any given year that are really solid. There are some fraudulent 9-win teams. And so it takes context is all I'm saying. So that brings me to Gainesville today. So the outside perception is, man, I don't know. I don't know if Billy Napier is cut out to be the guy who brings Florida back. You know, it's been like a generation now, if you define a generation as a decade, since some of you have seen Florida Gator football national elite standard, which is crazy because if you're like 45 years old watching the show, it feels like yesterday that Urban Meyer, Tim Tebow, Spikes, those guys were doing what they did in the late 2000s. But put yourself in the shoes of a 17-year-old kid. You couldn't walk and talk at the time that was happening. You were barely alive. It happens fast, guys. It happens really fast. So there's some people out there openly questioning whether Billy Napier and his staff are the guys to get the job done. It's why we wanted to take this trip, because while I may not change your mind or he may not change your mind on anything tonight, I wanted you to hear from him. And so we'll talk to him in just a second. I want to tell you what I think about it. So We go all over the country. We talk to the best of the best. We tour the best of the best. I see virtually every major program, or at least make an effort to every year. You noticed some consistent themes with the ones who have their act together and are winning, and you notice some consistent themes with the ones that are losing. All I can tell you is this. The results here, last year and year before, are completely and utterly detached from what it's like here in the building, what it's like inside the program. Now, that could simply mean that Billy Napier's done what he needs to do, and the results will be downstream of that. I happen to buy into the philosophy that your results are downstream of your decisions in football and in life. I don't think a lot of you believe that. So it's not my job to change your mind. It is kind of my job to tell you what I think. There is an army here, and many of them have worked at other places too, where they do it the way it's supposed to be done. Can't put it to you any other way. Doesn't guarantee wins in the fall. I'm not telling you it will. What I'm telling you is the characteristics and the hallmarks that you see when you go to other major programs that are getting the job done on Saturdays are present here. The resources are present, which is the other thing we're about to hear about from Napier himself, because they weren't present. A short while ago, they weren't present. In other words, I would have come down here 3 or 4 years ago and told you, honestly, there are some reasons tangibly when you look around here why they may not be matching the Bamas of the world or the Georgias of the world or even A&M, who is very well resourced in their own right. That doesn't exist anymore. And it's a testament to the administration here, because they got banged on for a long time. It's a testament to the administration here that they realized, hey, our fastball doesn't meet the fastball of other teams in this conference. And this Gator logo on our chest, if we don't back it up here, it doesn't really mean anything other than, wow, that's just a nice polo I paid $59.95 for. They've gotten up to speed on a lot of the areas they needed to get up to speed on. In some cases, to be very generic about it, they are leading the pack. There are things we saw today that I haven't seen anywhere else. There are practices in place I haven't seen anywhere else. And so if you're a Florida fan and you just kind of wonder, if you cut the program open, what's the DNA? Like what oozes out of the program? It's winning culture. It's winning culture. They just haven't won on the field yet. I happen to be a believer that that is downstream of creating that culture. The other thing to keep in mind, as we are about to talk to Billy Napier, is he put it very well today. He said, I don't really feel like we're so much in a construction phase anymore. We've kind of got it where we want it now, which is a 3-year runway, which used to be standard. In fact, coaches used to get 4 and 5 years. That's a bygone notion, because when you pay guys a lot of money, you're supposed to be able to just pop a program in a microwave and pop out a winner. And I get it. And I have no problem with Florida fans having very, very high expectations, as long as you give. What's the age-old adage on this show? As long as you give at an elite level, you should expect elite return on your investment. Got no problem with that. I think that Florida is on the precipice of being able to deliver that. That's my feel. The depth here, the quality of player here, the quality of athlete, the recruiting mechanism that's in place here, I think is light years better than what it was when Napier and his staff got here, and candidly, what it was before he got here. So we'll see, because ultimately football games will be played this fall, and they'll get 12 shots just like everyone else. And if they're 500, you won't care. And if they're 9-3, people will say, how in the world did that happen? Well, in the latter category, I'm just telling you, the things that have to be done for them to surprise you this fall are being done right now. It's not propaganda. I don't get a dime to say that. I'm telling you that's what I believe, based on the observations that we made today. Now, having said that, I want to do 2 things. I want to tell you that for those of you in states where it happens to be legal, if you think I'm wrong about that, you can go over to FanDuel right now and you can bet it. If you think I'm right about it, and I will put my money where my mouth is on this, believe me, you can go bet it. Whatever you do, the exclusive odds provider of this program is FanDuel Sports. And as I've told you, we're talking with them about a lot of things and a lot of ideas to bolster the robustness of the betting profile of the show this fall, because I happen to know a lot of you don't bet. And if you don't, I don't encourage you to start. That's not necessarily a line they give me to feed you, but you do whatever you want to in your personal life. I'm just telling you, if you never bet a dime, there is a lot of interesting stuff to be seen over there. So if you're interested, or if you've got some discretionary income that you feel like putting on the Florida over or the Florida under, Florida opens against Miami in the Swamp, and those lines are available right now, FanDuel, that's where I suggest you go. I appreciate you guys being here. So here's what we're going to do. I've got a good 30 minutes with Billy Napier that I'm about to toss to in standard fashion when we do these shows. I'm going to wrap it here so that the last thing you watch is really what a lot of you came here for. So appreciate you guys. Just a heads up, we are going to Central Florida tomorrow, and I will have a one-on-one with Gus Malzahn on the channel. And pretty much right as we get off air tonight, I'm going to announce where we're going Thursday. So I look very forward to that. You make it possible. Don't ever forget it. You make it possible for the folks at CBS to say, yeah, go out on the road as much as you want this spring. It's awesome. Just do whatever you want to do. So for our crew here, for our crew in Fort Lauderdale, we appreciate you guys. Without further ado, here is our one-on-one earlier today with Florida head coach Billy Napier. So if I just walk in the door of Florida football, which I did today, you guys opened the whole thing up. If I walk in, or maybe close the door, if I look from the outside and I'm wondering, year 3, where is he? Where is that program? How would you answer that being in your seat?
Well, I think we've completely rebuilt the player experience at the University of Florida. And I would say we're 2 years in, and this is the first off season where we feel like we're not solving a major problem or building out a system. And it's been great. I think we've been able to focus our time on the things that really matter. It's been a lot of fun. It's by far the best off season that we've had. We're about halfway through. So got the best group of players we have, and I'm really excited about the changes that we've made, the new staff additions. So far, so good.
I think if someone who had never coached before took your job, they'd probably freak out week to week based on whether things went well or didn't go well, but you can't do that. And You're talking about staff changes. You may 5 to 10% tweak the way you evaluate, but that's got to be a really, really broad conversation. So how do you decide when it's time to make changes versus let's give it some time, let's be patient?
Well, I think ultimately, this is a production business. To some degree, we all understand that. So leadership requires you to make tough decisions. And I think you've got to make the decisions in the best interest of the team. We went through a pretty exhaustive evaluation of where we were at when the season was over. And we made the changes that we felt like would put us in position to continue to improve. I think sometimes we get consumed with the result, but we've got to really think about the efficiency, the leadership in certain areas, a new teacher, a new voice, a little bit different philosophy and approach. I think we've done that. And one of the reasons that we're here and we've made it to this point is I think we've hired well. And I think we've got a really good building full of people that are capable, that have character, and can help us get where we want to go.
We were talking a little bit earlier, and I was sort of echoing to you what I've said many times over, let's call it the past 8 to 10 years when I've talked about Florida. And that is great tradition, great brand, like awesome stadium and game day atmosphere. But I don't think the outside world understood maybe how far behind in certain compartments that it takes to run a major athletics program they had fallen. So you couldn't do anything about that until you got here. When you got here, I remember kind of asking aloud on the show, is he going to get the yeses that he needs? And talking to you, it's been a slow but steady process, but this place is immaculate, and it looks so much different than it did 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. You're not housed in the stadium anymore. You've got really, really great football-only facilities. I think the public just takes for granted that exists, but it doesn't. How different a world is this now?
Well, I think it was part of taking the job. You think about Florida football. I grew up in the 90s. Spurrier was dominating college football. And then my early days at Clemson, 2006, 7, and 8, Urban was here. And Florida's had some great coaches come through here. So we're doing our homework and our research before taking the job. And I think we felt like there was an opportunity to come in, evaluate the product, evaluate the experience of the player, and go to work. I think the facility plans were in place. Scott Strickland did a phenomenal job of kind of this whole facility overhaul that's been done here, and I think we're finally to a point. We're in the facility, and we're reaping the benefits of that. It's helped improve our player experience, the efficiency of that each day, It also is a great first impression in recruiting. But again, it's about the systems and the processes inside the facility, the people that are leading each part of the organization, and I think that's where we continue to refine, we continue to get more efficient. And let's be honest here, college football has changed quite a bit in the last 2 years. So every 6 months we've had to adapt and evolve. But I'm excited about where we're at, and there's no question. This is one of the brands. This is a phenomenal place. We have an incredible experience to offer when you think about playing in the SEC and going to school at the #1 ranked public school in the country.
So we're on the road a whole lot, get to see many programs, and it's a dream job for me, so it's a blessing to be able to do it. So touring around here today and talking to a lot of different people that oversee a lot of different departments, keeping it generic, you guys do some stuff here that not a lot of people do. And it's not like you've been a head coach for 50 years or anything, and you've seen it done a million different ways. So which voices do you count on? Which opinions do you count on to look at and say, okay, I trust this person. We should do that. That'll keep us on the cutting edge. Because some of this stuff you've got a lot of expertise in. Some of this stuff you may have no area of expertise in.
Well, I think leadership comes down to hiring really good people. I mean, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. I've been fortunate to work for some of the best, and there's no question. We talk about talent on the field, but it's also important to have talent off the field. In particular, I think in college football in today's era, it's a competitive dynamic, and you need dynamic people. So we're fortunate that I think we have the resources and we've made good decisions in the hiring process. You met some of those people today, but there's no doubt we're a little bit different in our approach. I think we're committed to the person, the student, and the player. It's what I believe college athletics should be. And I think you probably experienced that today.
How would you describe the energy around the football program right now?
Well, you tell me. You were in the building today.
I think the energy in the football program is 180 degrees opposite than the perception of it outside.
Right.
Outside the walls don't matter to you, but I live out there. Yeah. And so out there, there's a feeling that, and it's this way in a lot of places now, well, if you don't immediately have success, then he must not be the right guy for the job, or that staff must not have things figured out, which is why I'm really glad you guys let us have the look that you let us have. You guys closed the season with 5 losses last year. A lot of them are close games. So a kick here, a fumble there. You may be talking about you completely different. I guess what I respected the most is, number one, everyone seems to be singing from the same hymnal here. There's one message. There's not a bunch of messages. And number two, there's an understanding that the efficiency metric is what you're looking for. Sure. And that could be a 3-point win, 3-point loss. Like how efficient were you on a given day? I think the outside perspective is way radically different than the inside attitude here. That's what I've experienced.
Sure. Graham Mertz got interviewed recently on Paul Feinbaum's show, and they asked him about that. And I think his point, the way he said it was, we're not worried about proving others wrong. We're worried about proving each other right. And I think ultimately the makeup of our team right now is what gives me confidence. And I think we've got a group of people here that have been here from the beginning. We know what's been taking place behind the scenes, and we're close. Okay, we're really close. So I think we're all excited about the work that's been done, going all the way back to December until now. And we see it. I mean, I've got confidence because I look around that team room and I trust the group of players that are in that room. And I think we've got really good people around them. So we're getting better. We know we've got work to do, but we're excited about what's to come.
The one thing I remember when we went out to the Utah game, you guys opened at Utah last year, and wasn't the greatest day on special teams. Mm-hmm. And it was somewhat of an issue last year. Spring game, you had some mishaps. Mm-hmm. So I look from the outside. I have no clue why those things are happening. I just know that can't happen to play winning football in the fall. Right. So walk me through how you see special teams right here, right now, and what do you think needs to be done to ratchet that entire operation up? Yeah,
so I think there's a little bit of perception and reality there, right? There's no question we had some organizational issues on special teams. And we had a couple young players, true freshmen, that made some critical mistakes. You know, we got 2 jersey threes on the field. We have a punt block versus Georgia. We jump over the shield versus Kentucky. We got a handful of plays where we got 10 on the field. But reality is the stats would say that we were pretty good on special teams. I think we were top 25 in the country in EPA, and a couple of our units are top 10 in the country. So for me, one of the things that we did in the offseason is we added another layer of expertise there. Joe Houston came over from the New England Patriots, and he's joined our staff this offseason. So I feel as if we've addressed some of those things. And I really believe if you watch the tape, people in our profession would say that they respect how we play teams, and we've done that. It's always been part of our DNA and culture as a team. So there's some perception there that's accurate. There's some organizational issues that we need to address, but reality is we were effective on the field, you know, and I think the stats would confirm that.
When I talked to you last year, you had taken Graham Mertz out of the portal, and you said, we looked at all the guys in there. We evaluated them all. We thought he was the best one. Like, he was the one we wanted to take. And I remember listening to that saying, that's interesting. Benefit of the doubt, he knows more than I do. That's interesting, though. Well, then the play on the field sort of bore that out last year. So walk me through kind of how you assess how he played last year. And then there's always an assumption in our world, well, if a guy returns, he's automatically going to get better. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Is there still a level of his game that you think could scale up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the number one thing when you talk about Florida football that's happened here that has set us up to have success in the future is Graham Mertz coming back to play another year of football. And we get a player who I think has a renewed confidence. You know, I think he starts this offseason as the leader of the team, completely different place than he was in when he arrived here last year. But we went through an extensive process. We've got a great personnel group that collaborates with myself and our staff. We made the decision we felt was in the best interest of the team, and I think Graham proved us right. You know, and I think Graham's MO at Wisconsin was inconsistency in turning the ball over, and I think he addressed those things. He connected with his teammates. He earned their respect with how he prepared, the example that he set from a work ethic standpoint, and I thought he was a great competitor, and he was tough and resilient on game days. So what we've got is we've got a great leader who's extremely sharp, and there's no doubt there's another level just from putting the whole season together. And I think ultimately what I learned last year is we got to play good around Graham, you know, and I think we got to protect Graham, and we've got to try to play really good complementary play at all the positions on offense. And when we do that, he can be very effective. So there's no doubt he came back. He's got middle round grades. He came back with a purpose, and he's worked that way so far this offseason.
When last season wrapped up, there was a lot of talk around the program of, will Coach Napier still call plays this upcoming year? Mm-hmm. And so I know what the message boards say. Walk me through how you actually decide year to year if you're going to change anything operationally, and then that specifically, what thought goes into that?
I think it goes back to kind of what we talked about in the beginning. There's no doubt the first 2 years here, it's almost like you're trading a couple years of your life. There's so much work to do to get things up and running. You know, we've always had confidence in our system. We've always been very efficient. And I think the working relationship with Graham, in particular with the player-to-coach communication piece, or the coach-to-player communication piece this offseason that's being added, we've got a really good system. It's proven. I think we finished the season playing really efficient on offense and putting our team in position to win. You know, so we have reallocated some of our responsibilities. I think giving Russ Callaway the co-coordinator title, giving him a little bit more ownership throughout the offseason and some of the things that we do in-house. But ultimately, I feel like it's in the best interest of our team for me to continue to call the plays, right? So if I didn't feel that way, I would have made a decision to make a change. So I'm excited about the input that we're getting from the staff and some of the things we've done to reorganize. But overall, more focus on the things that matter. Like I mentioned before, I don't think the place is under construction. I think it's built. And I think this is going to allow me an opportunity to focus a little bit more on the things that matter, and play calling's a part of that.
Administratively here, how firm a grasp and understanding do you feel like the people you answer to have of where you've been, where you are, where you think you're going, and what that actually takes?
Well, first of all, I think we've got phenomenal leadership. I've been impressed with the University of Florida as a whole when it comes to that. And I think my confidence comes that they've been living it with us, right? And I think Scott Strickland's been phenomenal relative to the vision that he had when we arrived, that we talked about before we came here, and the things he's done to help us. And then Dr. Sass has been incredible in terms of listening and then helping solve problems. I think that's the thing that I can appreciate is he's a big picture thinker, and he listens and he helps you solve problems. So we've got great support. We've got great investors in the program. There's in the NIL space, we're thankful for the system we've built. Florida Victorious has been phenomenal in that regard. And again, like I talked before, it's been 2 years of really, really hard work, but I think this is the first off season where I kind of look around and say, hey, most of our processes are in a good place, and that now it's about becoming more efficient, and I think that's going to lead to better football.
You mentioned the whole NIL piece, and those are just 3 letters people say. Most people aren't living in that world. I don't live in that world. I get a peek at it sometimes, but you were describing your situation here, and it sort of echoes what I've heard from a lot of the places around the country, and that's when NIL kind of got thrown in our lap, we did the best we could. We were drinking water from a fire hose, and we had 4 or 5 collectives, it seemed like. And so it's a process to get all that streamlined. Mm-hmm. I mean, how tough was that here?
Well, I think the time, effort, and energy that we put into NIL, that's been part of the job, right? Is solving that problem and coming up with the best system to help you be competitive. Not only to attract good talent and be competitive in the recruiting space, but also to retain your talented players. And there was a ton of uncertainty. I think the market changed every 6 months. The rules changed every 6 months, right? Not only with NCAA, but state laws. And what's real and what's not real. And I think every coach struggled a little bit with that. So the big thing is, I think we've built a system here that allows us to operate within our rules, right? We've set parameters for ourselves, and we've got great leadership. Jose Costa and Nate Barbera have done a great job with Florida Victorious. And they not only run NIL for football, but they do that for all 21 sports here. And there's alignment, and I think that's benefiting and will continue to benefit the University of Florida.
I've, for some reason, started to get fascinated about this whole work-life balance concept. And I've always believed if you're going to achieve it at a really, really high level in any particular sector, some balance is at least going to have to be sacrificed. So I say that phrase, work-life balance. How much of it do you think you have? How important do you think it is?
I think it's huge. And I think ultimately for you to sustain something, to repeat something, and get better at something, you've got to build a calendar and a year-round plan that allows you to do that. And I think for me, balance starts with family, and I think that's the challenging part of taking over a program, especially in the last 2 years. I would tell you that's been very challenging. But again, that's the exciting part to me, is I actually feel like this off-season, I feel a little bit more like it used to feel, before the portal, before NIL. I think we've got good in-house processes to answer those things. Everybody understands what's expected. This is how we do this. This is how we do that. And again, the game always is evolving, but I think in the last 2 years it's been really interesting. So balance is important, and I think at some point you got to know who you are. You got to know what you want your program to be about. What are your values? What are your convictions? And ultimately for me, that comes down to people, family being at the top of that list, and certainly for our staff and for our players. I think it's important that we model that. So it's one good thing about here. I do think that we have worked extremely hard to build what we have, and I'm excited about what hopefully that will lead to in the future.
My biggest fear, period, is lightning. Terrified of it. You can go through your general life, or you can just talk football specific. Is there a thing that you constantly worry about? Maybe it's within your control, maybe it's not, but it just keeps you up at night, and that's always the thing you're kind of on guard about.
Yeah, I think for me it's doing what is in the best interest of the people you've been entrusted with. I think part of this job is you make decisions that affect a lot of people, right? So putting time and effort and discernment into all these decisions relative to how they not only affect yourself, but more importantly, how they affect all the people that you've been entrusted with, right? There's some stewardship that comes with the job, relative to, it just impacts a lot of people, right? And you want to do your best for your people, your staff, your players, their families, and you try to make decisions in the best interest of the team. And we all understand that football is a game that's made up of people, right? And I think that's probably, just want to make good decisions for your people, and that's ultimately what I think a lot about.
Sometimes we'll be in post-game press conference settings, and a coach will say, we had a great week of practice. Other times you'll hear him say, I didn't love our week of practice. When you get towards the end of one of those weeks, and there's a Saturday coming up, and you don't feel like you've had the best week of practice, how different is your mentality? Does it change anything you do on Friday or Saturday before a game? Is there any kind of maybe jump starting that you're trying to do mentally to guys to make up for what maybe you thought lacked during the week?
Yeah, I think it's a daily deal. I think you're evaluating each day and where you're at, and then you're coming up with a solution. Okay, hey, what do we need to do? Hey, Sunday, where are we at? Part of leadership is having a pulse for your team, and I think that's where relationships with players and people within your organization and their relationship with the players, and you do that as a group. And I think it's a daily exercise throughout the week, and you're trying to get your team in position. No team's that perfect when you get to game day. In a game like football, it's almost like you're only as good as your worst day, right? And the consistency, how close can you get to performing at the top of your ability each week? And I think the teams that can do that are the ones that win more often. So consistency is key, and I think this is a game about preparation, and throughout the season, there's no doubt what you're describing is part of it.
So we just wrapped spring here, and congratulations. A lot of people are going to tell you got the toughest schedule in the country this fall, and I'm sure you worry about that on a day-to-day basis. But I am very interested, two-parter here. What is the centralized core focus of this thing will determine how good we are this fall? And ultimately, based on what you saw this spring, how good do you feel like you guys can be this fall?
Yeah, I think the schedule thing is a hot topic. But, I don't know that it's going to change at the University of Florida. Given our current dynamic, the league that we play in, the non-conference schedule that we play, it's always going to be challenging, right? And I think we're not playing the teams that finished the season ranked, and we don't have the team that we finished the season with, right? So it's ultimately going to be decided on the field in the fall, and all we can do is get consumed with our team, each individual part of our team, every player, every person within the organization, and how we execute our process to be the most prepared when we get to the season. I talked to the team yesterday. We're kind of halfway through the offseason, and I really believe where our team is at right now, it's going to come down to the intangibles. I think we've got enough pieces. It's going to come down to our values, right? Like what type of integrity, togetherness, discipline, effort, toughness, belief, what can we create this summer? I think college football in general, your team is constructed in the summer when the staff is away for a big portion of that time. So The good thing about the University of Florida football right now is we have credible leadership at the player level. We've got some guys that are living it out every day, and when they speak, our players listen. So that gives me confidence. And look, part of the recruiting pitch to every one of these guys on our team is like, we have work to do at the University of Florida, and you're either up for the challenge or you're not, okay? These guys came here, they accepted that challenge, and it's waiting on us in the fall.
What's very interesting is I'm talking to you the Tuesday the portal opens, is how different it may be if you're a brand new head coach with a roster full of guys that you inherited versus maybe year 3, a chunk, a core, a nucleus of your guys are guys that you recruited.
Right.
Because those are the guys that, for better or for worse, you recruited with messaging. And so, you know, talking to some people in the building, one of the themes that you pick up on is, yeah, what they sell you on is what you get here. There's not really a whole lot of misleading. So for better or for worse, what we have is what we were sold. I've got to imagine you'll never have your concerns alleviated. Anything can happen. It's the new era of college football. But it's got to be a little bit more a relieved feeling when you go to bed at night knowing, I actually know those guys. I recruited them. I know their mom, their dad. I know their family. I can have frank conversations with them because they've known me through the whole process.
Yeah, that's the most challenging part about the last couple of years is it's hard enough to build trust in a normal world, much less the world we've been living in college athletics the last 2 years. So, you know, we've got relationships with the majority of our team. We recruited the majority of our team. And then the ones we didn't recruit, I think we've proven over time that we are who we say we are. And I think in college athletics right now, it's about the voice of reason around each kid, right? The stability at home, who are their mentors, who are the parents, what type of program did they come from. And at a place like this, you should be able to attract the best. We get to decide who we sign, and they sign up for what we're selling. And I really believe you tend to attract what you're selling, and that gives me some confidence about the makeup of our team.
Last thing here. I know players will go into their off-season mode, and you've got an entire calendar for them. But for you and your coaching staff, I assume you'll have player interviews and exits that start as soon as today. What else is on the agenda from now until the next time we see you at media days or when fall camp opens?
Yeah, so we'll begin individual meetings with all the players. They're going to meet with the position coach, the coordinator, myself. We really recap the first half of the offseason, and then we present an individualized development plan for them when they get back. You know, our staff will go on the road next week, and obviously you're working on 25s, 26s, 27s. Then we'll come back. We'll begin the official visit process. Our players will start summer school May 13th, and we'll have, you know, a huge 10 to 11 week block of training. We do OTAs in June and July, and then obviously training camp is right around the corner. So still quite a bit of work to be done to kind of create the identity for this group, but you know, half of the work has been done, and I'm proud of our team. You know, I believe in our team, and I'm excited about the rest of the way.
By the way, that for a fan, it's like molasses in December. It takes forever to get to August. Do you feel like this time of year goes by really fast, or do you feel like it crawls by?
I mean, I think, man, we've got a lot of problems to solve each day. You know, I mean, I think we're, you know, ultimately, that's the thing I'm excited about is I think I know what the workload looks like between now and when we play. It's been quite different the last couple of years, but if your roster is stable, then that creates less chaos in the next 6 weeks, right? And you're able to allocate your time on things that really matter. So I feel like we're finally playing with a lead from a roster management standpoint, and that's going to allow us to focus on relationships with players, right? How to teach better, how to do things a little bit more efficient in June, right, when they get back. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're finally in a good place when it comes to that.
It's been a first-class visit. Billy Napier, we appreciate it, man.
Thank you, man.